About 6 or 7 years ago, when our family was in the process of moving to the city of Richmond to become your pastor, we received in the mail one of the strangest invitations that I have ever seen. It was in one of those newcomer packages where they're trying to let you know about the city or town that you've moved into. And the invitation was to take a tour of the Hollywood Cemetery. Now, some of you are familiar with the Hollywood Cemetery. It is a large, sprawling cemetery with rolling hills and winding paths over on Cherry Street, overlooking the James River. And it is a historical cemetery. There are 2 former presidents who are buried there, James Monroe and John Tyler. Jefferson Davis, the only president of the Confederate States, is buried there. And 25 Confederate generals, including George Pickett and Jeb Stuart, are buried in the Hollywood Cemetery. The brochure that was sent to me said that the Hollywood Cemetery is one of Richmond, Virginia's most famous and important tourist attractions. And it spoke of the legends of the cemetery. There is one where a little girl is buried and an iron statue stands over her grave to keep watch. There are stories about several ghosts that haunt the mausoleum. And then there is the legend of the the Richmond vampire. If you want to take a tour, they open in April and go through October. You can meet Monday through Saturday at 10 a.m. A guide will meet you at the corner of Cherry and Albemarle Streets. So you're probably wondering, did Newport go on the haunted tour? No. No way, not a chance, no thank you. Now, I don't believe in ghosts and goblins and zombies and vampires, but I'd still prefer not to take any chances. Besides, unless you have to be there, for me, the graveyard is a place to avoid, if at all possible. When I saw the ad for the Hollywood Cemetery, I thought to myself, I'll probably have to make my way there on some occasion. I've been there on more than one. In fact, I said to myself, I'll probably end up visiting most all of the cemeteries in the city of Richmond, and I have certainly done that and more in the last few years. You know how many folks we have lost to death in the life of our congregation. During this season of Lent, we have been focusing on the people that Jesus met on the crossroads of life as he headed down the road to the cross that awaited him in Jerusalem. And today we take a stop at the nearby cemetery to take a tour of the place of the dead. And as we do, we meet Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus. You know the story of Lazarus. He was a close friend of Jesus, and he became very ill. And so his sisters, Martha and Mary, who some say were a distant relative, perhaps cousins of Jesus, they sent word to Jesus and asked him to come and be in their home and bring his healing strength and power so that their brother might be well. It was about a day's journey from where they were when they sent word to Jesus and when they arrived where Jesus was. The text tells us that Jesus waits 2 more days, and then he goes that 1 day's journey to Bethany. He says to his disciples, "Let us go to the region of Judea, to the town of Bethany." And the disciples were scared to death because they knew that Bethany was just an hour or so from Jerusalem. And they knew that the religious elite in Jerusalem were plotting and planning ways to kill Jesus. So they wondered, why was he planning to go there? He said to them, "Lazarus is asleep, and I must go wake him," which had to be more confusing to them, because you know when you hear that somebody is sick and they're asleep, that you just want to leave them alone. They need their rest so that they can be well. "Why do you want to go and wake him, Jesus?" And so then Jesus says to them in a plain fashion, "Lazarus is dead." And now the disciples are even more confused. If he's dead, why go now? If he's dead, there's nothing that can be done about it. If he's dead, it's better off if you stay here, or you may end up dead too. And Jesus says, "I'm going to glorify God." And the disciples don't know what else to say. So they pack up their bags and they follow Jesus. When they arrive, it has been 4 days since Lazarus has died. In Jewish mythical culture, if you died, your spirit hovered near the body for 3 days before it departed. So to say that Lazarus has been in the grave and dead for 4 years is to say that he is as dead can be. And a great crowd has gathered at his funeral. Evidently, he's from a very large, wealthy, and influential family. And so mourners have gathered from all over the community, and there is weeping and wailing and sorrow. And Jesus walks up the path. And Martha greets him. Half in tears and half scolding him, she says, "If you had been here, he would still be alive." Jesus said, "He will rise again." And Martha said, "I know he'll rise again at the resurrection." And Jesus said, "You don't understand. I am the resurrection. I am the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die." You've heard me repeat those words of Jesus on many occasions. They are how I greet mourners whenever we gather to bury one we love. Jesus travels a little further down the path, and there he meets Mary, one who is obviously very special and has an important place in the heart of Jesus. She comes to him and says the same thing that her sister had said. "If only you'd been here." And Jesus wept. The crowd saw him crying and said, "Look how he loved him." But there were scoffers among them who said, "He can give sight to the blind. Why couldn't he come and heal his friend?" Jesus looks at Mary and the mourners and says, "Take me to the tomb." So they escort Jesus to the place where Lazarus has been laid. And then he says, "Roll away the stone." And the people protest. Martha protests the most. "Lord, he's been dead for 4 years. By now, the stench and smell of death will overwhelm us." Jesus looks at Martha and says, "You will see the glory of God." The stone is removed. Jesus prays, "Father, be glorified." And then he shouts, "Lazarus, come forth!" And you know what happened next. Lazarus came forth. Let me ask you a question. Where is the cemetery in the road of your life? Maybe it is a real cemetery. Maybe it is a place where you have laid to rest a family member, a parent, a child, a spouse. Maybe it is the place in your life where you have buried all of your broken dreams and hopes and lost plans for the future. Maybe it is the place where you have laid to rest that failed marriage or that financial stress. Maybe it is the place of broken relationships and chronic illness and debilitating pain. Maybe it is the place of unemployment. Maybe it is the place where life has seemed to suddenly go empty. Where is the cemetery in your life? Where do you feel a little bit like Martha and Mary? Maybe you feel a little bit like they did when they buried their brother. Where's the cemetery in your life? That place where hope seems lost, where you feel broken and frustrated, where you wonder if transformation is really possible, is change really a possibility? That place that you feel stuck in that same old rut? I'm not looking for us to engage in a corporate pity party. I just want us to acknowledge that there are places of dissatisfaction in our lives. Places where we feel the touch of darkness and the points of despair. There are moments when life seems to take a seriously bad turn, where we feel like we are complete and utter failures, where we feel like we are less of a man or less of a woman, where we feel like we are failing as a parent or a spouse or a child. It goes even deeper, doesn't it? There are moments when we feel like we sin far too much and love God far too little. Where we catch a glimpse, a vision of what life can really be like. And then we wonder, is it possible to even get close to that in the midst of our brokenness? Is transformation possible? As a pastor, I see it daily. People who are hoping and wondering if transformation can happen. There's the homeless vet I pass most every morning when I come to the office, standing at the street corner holding a sign, looking for spare change so we can get a bite to eat. There is the community legalist who's always putting his or her rules on everyone else, but you sense, even as they do that to themselves and others, that they wonder if there may be more to this thing called faith than rules and regulations and rituals and requirements. There's the drug addict who wants to be clean. The church hopper who's going from place to place to try to find a place where they can be served, but deep down inside you know they want to find a place where they can be involved and serve. There are the broken-hearted parents, the unfaithful husband, the cheating wife, those whose life has been spent climbing the corporate ladder only to get up a few more rungs and find out that it's not what they had imagined it to be. There's all the rest, the depressed, the oppressed, the insecure, the bitter, the frustrated. They feel like they are touring a cemetery, and they wonder, is life transformation possible? Most of us think the answer to that is no. Most of us think that transformation is an impossibility. You know what we say. Dead bones will never live again. People don't change. Leopards cannot change their spots. Tigers cannot change their stripes. You can never teach an old dog a new trick. That's the way it's always been and always will be. Things will never change. We've said that about our family, our friends, our co-workers. We've even said it about ourselves to explain away the reason why we feel like we're stuck in a rut. If only you'd come sooner, Jesus. If only you'd come sooner. You could have helped, but now it's too late. All we can do now is cry and weep and cover the tomb and leave some flowers and be on our way. The best we can do is tour the cemetery on the side of the road and pay our respects. The best we can do is sing a hymn and pronounce the benediction and engage in the committal. Go home. There's nothing more to see here. There's nothing more to do. Then Jesus shows up. I am the resurrection, he says. I am the life. Believe in me and you will live. I am life. Then Jesus shows up and he hollers in a loud voice, come forth. And resurrection happens. The dead get up and walk. A reminder to us that Jesus has power over life and death. But it is even better than this. You see, Jesus is not just declaring his victory over death. He's not just declaring his victory over the grave. There is more. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus gives his very self to us. I am life. I bring hope out of despair. I bring light into darkness. I bring possibility. That's what we need when we're touring the cemetery. When we're going to funeral after funeral, experiencing grief upon grief, knowing sorrow after sorrow. We know that Jesus is the resurrection, and we rejoice that those that we've let go of are safe in the eternal embrace of God's grace, but we need more here and now. We need Jesus' authority and power that goes beyond simply defeating death. We need to know. Right now, in this place, we need to know that we can live. That we can live as individuals, that we can live as a congregation, that we can live and make a difference, that God can make a difference through us. Didn't you experience some of that last week when we gathered for worship? We took a break, a time of refreshment from our Lenten journey. We had the children sing the happy song and dance, and we all stood up and danced with them. We listened to folks from the Micah Initiative and from the school where many of us volunteer. We listened to them tell stories about how Mr. Mike and Mr. Tommy, among others, have made a difference in the lives of children. We walk past from time to time the bulletin board where we see all of those thank you notes from kids involved in the Micah Initiative. We celebrated God's work among the children. Wasn't it great to see the whole front row filled with children today, 10 of them? We need to know that we can make a difference. Wasn't it nice to know that we could? Lazarus had experienced resurrection, but at that point he'd not experienced much in the way of life. He was alive, but he was unable to move to his fullest. Why? Because he was still covered with grave clothes. He was still wrapped in the burial shroud. We understand that. We know what it means to experience the power of Christ's resurrection, to feel his life fill us and inspire us, and still wonder whether it's possible to live up to the full potential of that life. We are the people of God. We are a community of faith. We are people called to life in Jesus Christ. But sometimes we don't live up to that identity. That sometimes is what happens when you spend a lot of time touring the cemetery. When you spend a lot of time focused on death. But Jesus gives us a promise, and the promise is life. Notice, it is not death and then resurrection. It is resurrection and life. And you have been touched by the resurrection power of Jesus Christ, and you can live. Here's the deal. We feel like we are bound by spiritual grave clothes, so we try to fabricate life. That's what we do. That's what our religious addictions are all about. Our bumper sticker motto is something like this. You've seen it perhaps. Jesus is coming back soon. Look busy. We think that that's what Christianity is about, looking busy. It doesn't look like us looking busy. It looks like us seeing Jesus in us, living through us. But we feel like we have to fabricate the appearance of life, that we have to fabricate plans and programs and priorities and activities, that we need to fabricate a calendar with all sorts of religious-looking stuff on it. That's why I've asked you to explore with me through Lent that question. What if we gave up our religious enterprises? What if we gave up our religious addictions? What if we focused on Jesus and Him only? What if we allowed Him to build our life around the gospel? It's a couple years ago now. I was invited to go to see Billy Sneed. Brian and I went. Billy and Evelyn were sitting on the porch. The hospice nurse was leaving when Brian and I arrived and went inside. You all know Billy. He looked at me and he said, "Okay, shoot." There was a gun on the table. I didn't know if he meant me literally picking up the gun and shooting or not. I said, "Billy, you invited me here. You shoot." He didn't pick up the gun. He said, "I don't want to become religious. I have not been a religious man for most of my life. People would see right through it completely if I suddenly became a religious person at the end of my life." And I talked to Billy the way Billy talked to others. I replied, "Why the hell would I want you to be religious?" Who were the people that Jesus had the most trouble with? It was the religious people. People who were always fabricating something religious, their doctrines and their dogmas, their plans and their programs and policies, their events and activities. Jesus didn't come to launch a religion. He didn't come so that we would become religious. He came to be the resurrection and the life. He came to give His life for us, to put His life in us so He could live His life through us. What if we gave up on religion, on all of the traditions and formalities and rituals and regulations and activities and enterprises, and what if we allowed the Holy Spirit to build us up as individuals and a community of people who look and act like Jesus? This should be one of the central questions every time we meet. But sometimes we are so ingrained in religion that we don't even know what it means to talk about giving it up, what it might mean or what we might look like. We are so bound up in the grave clothes of religion that we don't know the freedom of the grace clothes of the life of Jesus in us and through us. Luther was a farmer on the Northern Neck. He was one of those big corporate farmers. He had a huge business all over the Neck. Grain and corn were the primary products. But he also raised hogs. Hogs so that he could slaughter them and share the produce with friends and family. I had been invited to lunch. Luther had been working with the pigs in the slop when he came in. Margaret, his wife, looked at him and said, "Luther, change out of those stinking clothes." That's what Jesus said to those who were standing around Lazarus. Change those stinking clothes of death. Get rid of the stench of the grave. Experience the fullness of God's grace. Experience the magnitude of the divine life of Jesus in you. And we have a chance again today. We gather at the table. We remember that when Jesus gathered at the table, He took bread and He broke it. And He offered it to His disciples and He said, "Take and eat. This is my body broken for you." We remember that He took the cup and He offered thanks to God and He offered it to His disciples and He said, "Take and drink. This is my blood poured out for you." We remember that in the bread and the cup, in the body broken and blood poured out, Jesus gave himself so that we might experience resurrection and life. Don't let this be just another ritual today. Don't let this be just another religious activity for a Sunday morning. When you receive the bread and the cup, hear the voice of Jesus. He is calling you by name, calling you to come forth and to live. Let's pray.